Wishing a heartfelt Mother's Day to all of you wonderful moms within the Unashamedly You community. Whether you are already on the journey of motherhood or you are still awaiting that season of life, the most profound ministry for us as women lies within the hearts of our children. We pray that every episode during the month of May brings strength and encouragement along your journey. Happy Mother's Day. Hello and welcome to the Unashamedly You podcast, a space to enlighten, encourage, and empower you to go out and unashamedly be who God is calling you to be. I am your host, Jamie Herndon. I pray you hear less of me and more of Him as you listen to today's episode. Let's grow together. I am happy to be bringing on a friend of mine today and excited to be talking about something that I know so many of you prayed so hard for to come to pass that are listening to this today. And just to be able to hear the full story, I know is going to help and encourage someone in the same struggle to know that they are not alone. This lady is an amazing singer. She's recently a pastor's wife, and I just can't wait for you all to hear from her. So, Sister Stacey Pinell, welcome to the Unashamedly You podcast, and take a moment to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Thank you for having me. My name is Stacey Pinell, and me and my husband pastor the church that my grandfather started in the 60s and up until he died. And then my dad took it up until last year on Father's Day, and he resigned. And 2 days later, we become business owners. And then September of that same year made a year that we were newly parents. So we did all that within a year. And it's been a wild journey. I am an only child, and I grew up with a large family, a ton of cousins running around wild, raised in church. And hobbies, I don't have many. I like to bargain shop. I like to exercise. That could probably be a hobby if I let it. But mostly I'm just behind the scenes working. That's where I normally like to be, is behind the scenes.
It took me a little bit to convince her to actually be on this podcast. She's like, I'm behind the scenes. I'm like, but you've got a story and we need to hear it. So you had a lot going on that one year, and you mentioned that you are a mom. You were
Yes.
blessed with a sweet little boy now, but you've not had an easy journey into motherhood. Would you mind sharing with us your beginning story and maybe take us back to when you first started wanting a family?
Yes. So I was married at 30. I waited a while. And of course, being in my 30s, obviously, the older you get, as they say, you will have harder time trying to have or having kids. But I always knew that from a young age, I would probably have a hard time. I also always knew that I wanted to adopt, not knowing that I would later do that. So when we started trying to have kids, I want to say it was 2016, 17. And I kind of waited a while, just going back and forth. As time went on, obviously nothing happened. 2018 rolls around, and it was July, the beginning of July. I find out I'm expecting. And I took 6 pregnancy tests to make sure I was, am I seeing things? And oh my goodness. But the first thing I realized that one day my husband put on cologne, and I instantly made me sick. And I thought, that is strange. Like, that's not me, That went on for several days, and I never would tell him. So then I ended up taking those 6 pregnancy tests. But I ended up telling him, and that was the beginning of July. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, I miscarried. And during that time, I found myself in a place, obviously, I'd never been. I turned into my Job's comforter. My husband, he was falling apart. He thought it was the end of the world. And oh my goodness. Now, I need to make a disclaimer. I'm very, it's either black or white with me. I'm very matter of fact. If the Lord wants me to have a child, He'll let me have a child. I'm not going to sit around and cry and wait and why. That's just not how I am. That's not how I process things. And so my husband, on the other hand, he is younger than I am. And it took him several months. And finally, there was one day I said, listen, you're going to have to put your boots on, pull your straps up. There's a reason that this happened. And I don't know why. I don't know why the Lord is allowing this to happen, but there's a reason. He knows what we can handle. He knows what I can handle. Let's just go with it. And so after we had that talk, I had pep talk, he got better, and we started processing things differently. So that was all in between July and December of 18. Well, in December 2018, Cohen was born. Had no clue, obviously. And January 2019 rolls around. A sweet lady in our church who, she's very quiet. She sticks to herself. She prays. She's over in her corner. She just minds her own business. She's one of those. She was at home, and it happened to her 3 or 4 times. Now, mind you, she had no clue that we were trying to have kids. And one time she was ironing, and I think 2 times she woke up out of a dead sleep, but she heard something ask her, are you going to stand in the way of your brother and sister's blessing? And she was like, yes, I am, because I'm not going to do that. Lord, that's touchy with some people. And which I'm not that way, but still it is with some people. It's touchy with some women. And she, after it happened a 3rd time, she said, okay, I'll do what I have to do. She started knitting a little cap and some booties. And then she wrote a note. And in the note, I wish I would have brought it in, but she said her prayer was that I would be a mother, or either expecting, or if there's a child out there for me, even for adoption, by May of 2020, or Mother's Day 2020. And this was all in January of 2019. And so she brings it to the church. I want to say she brought it. It was around Mother's Day of 2019 that she brought it to church. She brought it to my mom. She said, can we stick this in the women's prayer room? And when the ladies see it, they could pray over it. And so mom's like, of course, what. Well, it was about a month later, I think May, that happened in May. June, we're having this wild services on a Sunday night, and people are worshiping. I'm kind of sitting, it was towards the end of the service, and I'm sitting on the platform, the altar area. A sweet girl in our church who's also very quiet. This was very out of character for her. And she's sitting beside me, and she just starts praying. And all of a sudden, she starts praying in the Holy Ghost loud. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, that's out of character in my head, And she reaches over and places her hand on my belly, and she just starts hollering, the baby is coming. And at the time, because the way I am, I was being spiritual at the time, but then I went carnal, and I'm like, Lord, please don't make her a liar. Like, I didn't know, like, Lord, what is going on? And so, because this was so out of character for her. And I remember kind of opening my eyes, like peeking around, like, did everybody see that? I mean, she said it so loud the whole church heard her. But I remember my husband just falling in the pew. He had been sitting in a pew. He just fell down and started just bawling. Well, I had a different reaction, obviously. But after that, time went on, nothing happened. The year went by. Well, now we're in 2020. Still, there's nothing. And between January, I want to say all the way up until April, we had started doing testing. I mean, I might as well, And then I find out what I knew, that I wouldn't be able to have children. The doctor told me, he said, without IVF, I'm assuming that's the strongest, drugs out there. I'm not, maybe they have something stronger now, but at the time he said, and I can't guarantee you that it would take, he said, more than likely what you have, it would take a miracle for you to have a child. And I said, okay. He said, but basically, my eggs were too weak. I was born with weak eggs, so they were too weak. And I said, okay. I said, that's all I needed to know. I remember having my paperwork. I walk out of the building. I sit down in the car, and it was the first time that tears came to my eyes through the whole process. I wasn't sad for myself. I was more so sad and now I'm getting teared up. I cry more now than I ever have. But I thought about my parents. They're never going to be grandparents with my biological child. And then there's my husband. And then in the same breath that I start tearing up, I'm like, girl, get it together. There's other kids out there who need. And I shifted my thinking. I believe that's when it started. I started shifting my thinking to where it was almost to the point where when I would even think about having my own child, I would think I was selfish because I'm thinking there are so many kids out there who need parents. You're selfish for wanting to cry or even think about what would your child look like. Quit thinking like that. That's just the way I was. And knowing that it's a natural thing to think that way, but there again, this is how I processed. After I pulled myself together, I told my husband, and surprisingly enough, he handled it, and I said, okay, next step. Well, we waited. I didn't even just kind of put it on the back burner. COVID hit. We started living life and things started happening. My husband's a barber. And so then they had to quit working. And it was all during this time, my aunt, my dad's youngest sister, she had Alzheimer's, Lewy body dementia. And so she had a caregiver. And it was I want to say it was on a Thursday or Friday. It was the week before Mother's Day of 2020. And we're all sitting in their kitchen. And there was some men coming over to their house so my husband could cut their hair, obviously. And the caregiver was sitting in the kitchen with us. There were several of us there, and we were sitting around talking, but we were all talking about this, just how expensive. Also, I want to say, too, with the IVF, and this is just the way I felt about it. I just felt like if the Lord wanted me to have a child, he would allow. And I just felt like IVF was tampering with that. It just kind of made me feel strange. I don't know. And I know it's not, but I felt strange about it. So fast forward, we're sitting there at the table talking, and she said, have you ever considered adoption? I said, yeah, but it's so expensive. Although I knew enough to get me in trouble, I didn't know everything about it. I didn't know what programs were out there. I didn't know what they offered, what the state offers, nothing. She said, and she called this man, she said, Eddie and Gloria, they have a great grandson that needs to be adopted. And I said, are you serious? Well, Eddie and Gloria, Cohen and I actually share cousins. So his great uncle was married to my dad's oldest sister at one time. And so these people have been in my life, my entire life. I've known them for years, obviously. And he said he has a great grandson that needs to be adopted. He's in the system. They're fixing it. I said, well, tell me everything. And she starts telling us there at the table, she was saying how he has 2 older siblings. Their great aunt adopted them. She's up in age. She doesn't want to have to raise a 16-month-old. And I understand. I mean, she has a 30-something-year-old. She doesn't need. And so there's Cohen. He's in the system. And she said, my son and his wife are fixing to adopt the younger brother. There's also a half brother. And I said, and this is when red flags started going up for me. I said, well, why wouldn't they get Cohen? And she said, well, she just kept saying they wanted a baby. I said, well, he's 16 months old. She said, well, at the beginning, they thought about getting him. And she started telling me. And she said, but then they put it off. And so I keep asking questions because it just wasn't adding up. That investigator side of me was coming out. And so she said, they're starting their classes. They're starting the process. And I kept going back to, well, why wouldn't they get because I knew enough to know that they always keep siblings together. And whether they're have the same parents or they're half siblings, they always try to keep them together. And she said, she would never, even though I would come back around to ask the question, she would never answer it. Then finally, towards the end, she said, there is one thing. She said, he's biracial. Would that be a problem? And I said, absolutely not. I said, where can I meet him? Can I call him? And so she gave me their number. And so that was all before Mother's Day of 2020. And the Wednesday after Mother's Day, me and my mom went to their house and we met him. And he took to my mom faster than he took to me. I was being reserved. There again, that's how I am. Because, it was happening fast. I was like, my word, this has happened fast. But after we spent several hours talking to the grandparents and I was playing with him and just getting to know him. Then by Friday, I had called the caseworker they were using and she had us signed up for classes. But to backtrack back to the lady in our church who had written the letter, she had said that she wanted me to hear something, know something by May or Mother's Day of 2020. And it happened. That happened. It was all around. So fast forward, we started for the next few months from May, June, July, August. We would go, me and my husband would go and twice a week and spend a few hours with him so he would get used to us. And then in August, the caseworker told me, she said, y'all can start getting him for the weekend and then bring him back. And I said, okay. Well, that started happening from August all the way to 2021. They never come. And then weird things started happening. I couldn't get a hold of the caseworker, couldn't get a hold of nobody at this time. The only lady that I could talk to was the guardian ad litem who would come and see about the child. And she was very diligent about checking on him, whether he was at our house or their house, wherever he was, she checked on him. And I would ask her, have you heard anything? What's going on? And she said, I can't get him to respond. And this went on, like I said, up until I want to say it was about April of 21. And a lady calls and she says, I'm so-and-so. I'm from Family and Children's Services, the whole thing. She said, I need to know what's your name, all this stuff. She was asking me all these questions. And in my mind, I'm thinking, y'all know my information already. You already have it. So why are you needing it now? And moral of the story, come to find out, he pretty much was lost in the system. The first lady we started off with was not really doing her job. Nobody was checking on him. And it's just a miracle that he ended up being with good grandparents. He was with parents. He wasn't with some random strangers. He was with us and he was being taken care of. It could have been totally different, obviously, So she comes in and she's asking me these questions, but she didn't stay on the phone very long. It was very vague, strange. That happened in April. I never heard from them again. During that time, though, one day when I went to drop Cohen off, it was on a Monday, his birth mom was there. And she had substance abuse. She was addictions, but she happened to be there. And she come out of the room. She said, hey, I just wanted to give you something. She's holding a bag. It was a Ziploc bag. And she has all the stuff from when he was born, all his stuff from the hospital. His first outfit, a picture of her and him when she was holding him after he was born, his little wristband, the whole kit and caboodle. And she said, you're going to need this. She said, since you're going to be his mom, you're going to need this. And I was like, honestly, I started shaking. Very odd for me, but literally thought I was in the Twilight Zone. It was the oddest feeling come over me. I said, thank you. I said, are you sure you don't want to keep it? And she said, no. She said, you're going to need it. This is for you. I said, well, thank you. I said, thank you for letting me have that. I remember getting in the car and I called my husband. I called my mom. I said, you're not going to believe what happened. I believe in God winks. And at the time, I just felt, because there was so much confusion going on, that she was just letting me know. I mean, she was adamant. You're going to be his mom. She had no clue about what was going on, you know. And so we didn't hear from them. I never heard from them. The grandparents heard from DCF, and April, May, June, they start getting word that they're going to take him from us. And I thought, hold on a second. How are they going to take? They don't even know what's going on. They have not asked me questions. They haven't interviewed us. They don't have a, how can they take, you know, all the questions are coming. And then that other side of me, no, I was not a mother, but that I'm assuming my motherly instinct, that fight started coming out in me. And little did I know, I was being very naive. We had our first court date in August of 21. We get there and this woman walks out. I had already been warned that they were going to try to take him from us, but I was going to kill him with kindness or try. And if that didn't work, then Jesus excused me for a second. And so I'm sitting in there. They were late as usual, because this is how they operate. I'm sitting there, we're waiting. They walk in. This girl walks up to me. She says, so who's Stacey? Who's Blake? She had no couth about her whatsoever. I said, we are, you know, she said, okay, this is how it's going to go down. And she says, we've already voted. We've already decided he's going with the other family. He's no longer going to call you mom and dad. And we want y'all to be involved in the transition of him moving into the other home. Whew. When she said that, I could, my heart rate, you know. And so at first I said, whoa, wait a second. I said, you voted, but we wasn't in on the vote. I knew enough that we were supposed to be. She said, no, y'all. I said, no. And this is all before we're walking into the courtroom. We're outside of the court. And I said, first of all, how do you make a child stop calling you mom and dad? And I said, and if you think I'm going to help him transition, you have another thing coming, which in reality, I probably would have. But, and she was, I mean, she just kept on. And she was so hateful and so rude. And to be honest, and I'm going to be as honest as I can, literally went through my head. I was thinking, heifer, you fixing to find out. Me and you fixing to go toe to toe because you just made me mad. Like it sparked something in me. She just made me mad. And so we'll see about that. And I remember telling her, now I was naive when I said this, but I said, the judge will have the final say. She said, no, he don't. Well, me and her were talking about two different judges at the time, you know. Little did I know, in this situation, DCF, they do have the final say to a certain extent. The judge can put his input as much as they can, but if they come against you, that most of the time, you know, what I did not know is that if guardian ad litem and the caseworkers are for you, then you do have a good chance of winning, you know. I didn't know that. Well, we actually had to hire a lawyer in the process of all this. He informed me before I went. So that's that part, but I didn't know up until, and I thought, you know what? I'm fixing to show you. But I was being very headstrong, and it had to be the Lord to allow that to happen. We walk in there, and of course, they lay their information out, and the judge that was there, he was actually a retired judge. He was just filling in, but he starts flipping through the paperwork, and he says, this has been going on way too long. He starts rattling off all their terms. You know, they didn't have none of his paperwork, and she was the one over it. She didn't have his paperwork. She didn't have my information. She had nothing. There was no dates. There was nothing. Now, our caseworker and our guardian ad litem, we had everything. And I was thinking, that's a win for me, in my mind, I'm thinking that. But you leave more confused, when you go in there. I was more confused after I left. I was mad. Honestly, I was angry, and I stayed angry. I was in an angry era of my life just because they don't tell you anything. They lead you to believe all these things. And we were just very, very, very naive. And if I would have had somebody to tell me, which is when we hired the lawyer, he sat down and he explained it to me. But going into it, we were just so naive. I was just, let's get it going, not knowing that the process is going to take forever. And so, like I said, we were confused when we left. I was mad and I was saying everything. I was just making comments about everything. And so she had done struck something in me that honestly I didn't know I had in me. So as time goes on, that was in August, September, October. This is all of 21. He's still staying with us. They still don't check on him.
Is he staying with you full time at this point, or is it still the
Yeah,
weekend?
he's still, no. He was only the whole year he's been staying with us 3 to 4 days a week. And it was mainly Friday to Tuesday. Like I would do that. I did that because my husband's off on Mondays and he could spend time with him. We could take him to church on Sunday morning, Sunday night, and he'd be able to be in church. I wanted him to get that, get used to that. And so, and then Tuesday through Friday, back to Friday, he'd be with his grandparents, great grandparents. They were in their 80s. And so every now and then, and mind you, they still would not call me. I had no idea what was going on. The grandparents, they would call them, but they wouldn't call me. It's like they had something personal against me, is how it felt. October rolls around, and mind you, I had started getting word that it was probably coming soon, that they were going to start getting him. Well, it happened. And the wife to the other family, she calls me and she said, listen, she said, I'm sorry this is happening. And she was nice. I'm not going to say she wasn't. She said, we want to work with you guys and we don't want it to be awkward, whatever. I mean, but my goodness, the child's been with us for a year and a half now. How can you not make it awkward? He doesn't know them at all. They're distant relatives, but he does not know them. And they were trying to do the right thing, to give them the benefit of the doubt. So they pick him up on a Friday. I get a phone call, and from his grandparents said, yeah, they got him. He was okay. And by then he was still too little to really understand, and he liked to ride and go. It was an adventure, They brought him back on Monday. The following Friday, he asked the grandmother, I mean, he picked up on it so fast. He's highly intelligent. His street smarts are incredible. It's unreal how this kid, he acts like an old man. We call him an old man in a little body, but his smarts, like he picks up on stuff fast. And at 2.5, he had picked up on this. I think he had went 2 weekends maybe is when he really picked up on it. But he would ask his grandmother, when are you going to get your hair done? And he knew on Friday, if she had to go get her hair, that was the day that they were going to come pick him up. I mean, he picked up on it that fast. Well, it started getting to the point where he'd start crying. He was like, Papa, don't make me go with him. Don't. And he said, I want my mama. I want my mama. And then this is when it just got bad. The grandparents would call me. They'd be so upset. And I was trying to be strong for them. And then here I was. Let me back up. So when they got him on that first weekend, he'd come back on Monday. I would pick him up on Wednesdays. And I chose Wednesday. We could only get him 1 day a week. So it knocked it down from us getting 3 or 4 times a week to once a week after a year and a half. And I chose Wednesday so I could bring him to church on Wednesday nights. We'd play all day Wednesday, and then we'd take him to church. And after church, he couldn't spend the night with us. I had to take him back home after church. So the little fella there's a lot of moving parts. Then Friday would roll around. Well, it got to where he would start screaming, and he would scream and scream when they would pick him up. I don't want to go with him. I don't want to go with them. This went on up until February, mid-February. But during this time, I want to say it was October, November, we had our big Zoom meeting. We was at our guardian ad litem's house, and we're talking. The judge is on there, the DCF clan, everybody's on there. The other family is on there. And his great aunt that has his half brother and sister, she now had to get involved by this point, because if they're wanting kids to stay together, siblings, then he should have been with his older siblings, because he was with them, from the time. So she started her classes. She went through the whole process. If she could get him, she could then turn around and turn him over to us. It was something funny in the law. Our lawyer had us to do that. It was a hassle, and it was sad for her to have to go through all this, but she was she was glad to do it, just because she knew he was bonded to us. We were his parents. The other family, they could have had him in the beginning if they wanted him. So fast forward, she's on this Zoom call as well. There's all these people on the Zoom call. And before we went into the guardian ad litem's house, my husband tells me, he said, "Now, Stacey, please be on your best behavior." He said, "We're Christians first." I said, "I got it." I said, "But, Jesus did flip tables. And there's things that if I have to," he said, "do not embarrass me." And he said, "And furthermore, don't embarrass yourself." I said, "Listen, if I don't tell it, and if I have an opportunity," I said, "who's going to tell it? So if I have an opportunity, I will say, I am going to speak up." And he said, "Well, just keep your cool." I said, "I'll do my best." So by then I was ready. So we walk in, and here they go. I mean, they come out of the gate swinging on the Zoom call. The judge is on there, and he's having to calm them down, and they're taking, I mean, it was just they were going back and forth, back and forth. So they do this vote. Well, obviously there was like 6 against, I don't know, 15 of them. So 15 of them wanted him to go with the other family, including that family who said they were with us and on our side, but had turned against us. And they're the ones trying to get his half younger brother. So they voted against us. So it was like us against the world, basically. And then we vote against them. And they say their final comments or whatever. Well, right before the judge asked, he said, "Anybody have any questions?" And I just raised my hand, and I said, "Your Honor," I said, "I'd like to ask a question." He said, and then that's about that time my husband started stomping on my feet. He was nudging me with his knee. He was muttering under his breath, "Be quiet." He was just, "I have a question." I said, through this process, they're constantly saying, "We want the best interest of the child." It's always the best interest of the child. They want to keep them together. I said, "What I don't understand is, how can you keep something together if it's never been together?" I said, "These boys, Cohen does not even know who his half brother is. He's never seen him." I said, "When he was born, they put him right into a foster home. He never went to the grandparents or the aunt that has the older siblings. He never went to their house. So how can you keep 2 things together if it's never been together?" And he said, "You know what? You have a point." And he started writing stuff down. And I said, and furthermore, I said, if these people really knew the situation, they would have known that in the beginning, they had an opportunity to get Cohen before he was born. They was made aware. They even asked questions. They asked his birth mother, "When's the due date?" All the questions. And when she told them that he was going to be biracial, or he was biracial, she never heard from him again. I said, so in the very beginning, they had an opportunity to get this child, but they waited a whole year. And she finds out she's expecting again, and she has a baby who's not biracial, and they jump on the opportunity. which then I said it a little better than I'm saying it now and explaining it. But I made a point. Hey, they did have a chance. So why didn't they get him? Is why. Well, when I said that, like I told you before, all the cameras on the Zoom call started shutting off, including that family. They shut their cameras off. And I struck a nerve like it was bad. And I probably made it worse for us in one sense, but then I got them to thinking. Once that whole call was over, the guardian ad litem said, I'm glad you said that. She said, because if you wouldn't have said it, they wouldn't have known. And that was the last piece of information that I was going to use if I had to. And I found the opportunity and I used it. Fast forward, he's having to go to their house now. And that went on. In that Zoom call, he ordered us to have a bonding assessment. And so me and Cohen had to go to this, I call it a psych ward. It's not a psych ward, but that's kind of where it was at, where they watched us interact and how he was with me, how he responded to me. Then he had to go with the other family. Now, the day of our bonding assessment, his grandpa had brought him, obviously. And when we were leaving, he said, hey, Stacey, he said, could you take him for a few hours? He said, I got to go do some errands and then I'll come pick him back up. I said, yes, sir, that's fine. As we're in the car, now, mind you, he's just a little bitty fellow. He's sitting in the back seat and he says, Mom, the other family, he said, they did such and such to me. And I said, do what? And I'm like looking at him in the rearview mirror and he said, they did this, and he starts reenacting. I said, really? And I just start asking him questions and he starts reenacting and saying stuff that's going on at this house. Now, during this time, I started praying, Lord, let Cohen torment the fire out of them. When he goes to their house, let him be the biggest brat he can be. Let him drive them crazy.
I'll interject right here. I remember you putting that on social media and me praying the same exact prayer. I'm like,
are you
Lord.
serious? Yeah.
I'm like, Lord, let him scream the whole time.
Yeah. Well, you know what? During that whole Zoom call, that was a time in my life where, and I'll get to it towards the end, but prayer, obviously, you need to be prayed up because you're going to go through some things. And at that time, I was in my angry phase. I was very angry. I never cried. 2 times I cried throughout the whole process, but I was it was because I was so angry. This was one of the times, but I remember during this time that literally I depended on everybody else's prayers, that when I knew that they would come and they were coming to pick him up, and then I would get word back that he had such a hard time leaving. And you, believe it or not, I never told you this. You and I can't tell you, it was for at least 4 or 5 months. Every single weekend, I had somebody reach out to me and say, I was just letting you know I was praying for you today, that things are, blah, blah, or yada, yada, yada. Or I was praying for y'all today that this, and this. Nobody ever had a clue at that very moment that when I would get those messages that, oh my goodness, those prayers is what kept me going, because I'm going to tell you, I'm flesh. And yes, I would pray, but I can't say that I would just go and pray. I go, Lord, would you do something, where you at? I was just mad, angry. I was ready to fight. Instead, I was in my flesh a lot. I'll just put it that way. And I really depended on everybody else at that time. I didn't realize that until later on, I mean, it really got me through, is everybody else is what helped me get through it. But after going through the bonding assessment, and then I would pray, God, let him torment. Well, after I got him to the house, then he reenacted. And I really don't know. I never had a conversation, but I videoed it. I made sure I had videos. When he would start talking, I pulled my phone out because I was going to have everything, all my homework, And so he reenacts that he throws himself on the couch and he puts his hands over his mouth and he's reenacting and he's telling me this is what's happening. And I'm like, my God, Lord, don't let them be abusing him. Yeah, I want him to torment them, but don't let them abuse him. Is that what's happening? And the way he was acting, that's the way it looked. You know, whatever they did, but to this day, he still talks about it and he can tell me details. And he's 5 now, and he was only 3 at the time. I believe he was 3. Yes, he had just turned 3. Very much he remembers all of that part of it, but it went on, and I told his grandparents, I said, I don't want to scare y'all, but this is what's happening. And so the grandpa, they put cameras up in their house. So when they would come, they would have video proof to show DCF, this is what's happening. He's screaming. He would go hide. He would go get in the bed and act like he was sleeping so they couldn't pick him up. He would hide under the bed. I mean, I could go on and on and on about that, the things he would do so they wouldn't get him, or he would make them not want to pick him up. Then there was one day, this was all still the beginning of 22 by then, after our bonding assessment and all that went down. His grandpa has to take one of the other grandkids to the doctor, and Cohen was with him, and they're waiting to be seen. They're in the lobby, and that mother walks in with her child to, he had a doctor's appointment. Well, Cohen sees her walking in, and he starts screaming to the top of his lungs in that doctor's office. She walks in, and she's trying to be friendly to him, knowing that weekend she was going to have to pick him up. And he starts screaming and screaming to the point that it embarrassed her so bad. I want to say that she ended up leaving or something. It was bad. And he showed himself real good right in public. And I think that was on a Monday. Well, on Friday, they were supposed to come pick him up. And she called, she said, we're not going to get him this weekend. She said, we're going out of town. She said, she made up some excuse why they couldn't get him. And he said, okay, that's fine. So I went and got him. And technically I wasn't supposed to, but I did. Nobody's going to know unless they showed up. DCF showed up, And so I brought him to church, and then I took him right back. Matter of fact, I took him back on Sunday night so he didn't stay the night with us. It was during that time that, in the middle of all this, my parents had moved in with my aunt to take care of her. And me and my husband moved in with them to help take care of her. So we lived opposite ends of the house, obviously. And I mean, it was a lot. It was a lot. So we're dealing with my aunt, and then we have him coming on the weekends. And then at the time, it was like having 2 toddlers at the house. And then you're dealing with the stress of everything. But there was one time this was another time where I broke down, and I just broke down. I was so mad. Something had happened, and I guess I was talking to my mom, I believe is what it was. And I just broke down, and my aunt, who didn't even know who she was, who we were, but she would pace around and walk. She would walk around to us, and like if we were talking, she'd walk by us. She was constantly walking by, like she was listening type thing, but didn't really understand what was going on. And for a brief moment, and this is where I say a God wink, she reaches over and puts her arms around me. Now, mind you, she's final stages of Lewy body dementia, and she reaches over and puts her arms around me, and she hugs me, and she pulls me back, and she has her hands on my shoulder, and she said, everything's going to be okay. It's going to work out. Everything's going to be okay. She had a lucid moment for just a brief second, and then went right back into never knowing, which then that turned into me really crying, because I was thinking, oh my goodness, she don't even know who she is. She don't know who we are. But for that brief second, she knew who I was, and she knew obviously something was wrong, that she told me that. Once that happened, I never really I was like, okay, it's going to work. It's going to happen. I mean, there's several things that's happened, but we're going to, obviously you still I kept getting word. It was all over the place. Your information you're getting is all over the place. So Fast forward a few weekends, they didn't get him for a few weekends because I'm pretty sure that embarrassed her so bad in the doctor's office. One weekend, the one weekend that me and my husband, we went to eat was on Friday night, and we knew he was coming to get him. And he says, the grandpa calls us and he said, okay, they still haven't come. And I said, okay, well, just let us know if they do or whatever. He said, okay. Well, we never heard from them. They normally came around 5, and it was going on 7 by this time. And me and my husband got done eating. We get in the car, and I remember sitting down in the car, and I said out loud, I said, Lord, just can you end this? I mean, enough already. Just, and my husband said, Lord, let it end tonight. And we just had like a quick prayer. It was just, that was all. And I remember we still didn't hear. And I'm thinking, my goodness, did something happen? He still has not called. And he always called us. So we go down the road, we go to a store, and we wasn't in that store 30 minutes. And I get a phone call. His grandpa said, can you FaceTime a second? And I said, yeah. Well, I FaceTimed him, and it was Cohen's face. And he says, I don't have to go anymore. And I said, do what? And he said, I don't have to go anymore. I said, whoa, wait a second. I went flying across the store, found my husband. I said, we got to go now. We got to get in the car. And I said, wait, tell me everything. What's going on? We'll come to find out. Both the husband and wife showed up, and he said, the husband broke down and started crying. He said, we can't do this anymore. We're not going to torment him. And that is exactly what's happening. We have been tormenting him. And that is, in the end, they meant well. But what had happened was DCF had threatened them that if they didn't take Cohen, they were going to take the son that they had, which is not, they're not allowed to do that. But they do. And this is what goes on behind the scenes. It's a very corrupt system. So we had a feeling that that is what was happening. And in the beginning, all I wanted was for them to fight back, get on our team, and let's fight together. You know, y'all want y'all's child, we want ours. These kids were never together. They didn't know each other. They didn't know they were half brothers. When they get older, if they want to meet, that's fine. If they want to be, but as of now, you don't force something. You know, they only wanted 3. We just wanted Cohen. That was it. And so, but they had to portray to us like they wanted him. And probably at one point, they may have convinced themselves they did want him. But after I started praying that he was acting so bad, I think it changed their mind. It changed their mind. And he's a mess. He's a handful. But so they sat there, and the dad broke down, and he apologized, and they made things right. Now, they contacted their caseworker. That caseworker contacted us. By this time, we had already gone through 5 caseworkers, and we was on number 5. His information just kept getting handed off to the next person. So it just kept getting further and further in the system. Stuff was getting lost. Luckily, we had everything we needed in the paperwork, plus our lawyer, which helped us in the end. That all happened February, March. Well, they say, well, and it's like they want to play mind games with you. And they didn't want to say that I was right, you know, and I get that. But they never called. And you had reached out to me prior, actually before Christmas, and told me, hey, have you ever thought about going on a 52-day fast? I didn't even know. I never heard about it, you know. And then you explained it to me. I believe it was you that explained it to me. And then I was going to do it before Christmas. And I thought, no, I'm going to wait. So then after all this, the bonding assessment, all that happened, I decided, you know what? We got to get this done. This has gone on too long. I'm going on a 52-day fast. And I decided to fast sweets. And it was during that time that my aunt, she was transitioning. She had broke both her hips within just a few weeks apart. And a lot of people kept coming to the house. They were bringing us food, and there were sweets always at the house. And there was pies and all the things. And I love sweets. And I would just have to walk around, and they would say, just have it. Somebody would say, taste this. And I'd be like, no. This went on. I mean, I was tried. I'm going to tell you right now. And so that went on. Then up until the end of May, my fast, she died in April, and I had just started the fast. So the end of May, my fast was going to end on a Monday or Tuesday. And then all of a sudden, DCF calls me on Thursday before that Monday, and she said, "Hey, Stacey," mind you, I was sick as a dog. And so I'm laying in the bed, not knowing where I was at. And she calls and she says, "Hey, Stacey, this is Tara from DCF, blah, blah, blah." She said, "I just wanted to let you know that we voted and Cohen's going to be going. He's going to be y'all's. He's going to, we've decided that he's going to." And I wanted to just say, "I told you so," but you wouldn't listen. Of course, I didn't. But it was after that I said, I still didn't believe it. And I didn't want to like second guess my whole fast. And I guess because I couldn't believe it was happening. I was in shock. And to me, when you go through this journey of adoption and then they finally tell you it's going to be yours, you don't believe it until their last name changes and you sign that paperwork, because at any minute it could change. You never know how the system is. You don't know what they're going to do, what they're thinking. The laws are constantly changing, which was a good thing. And that happened to us. Several laws have been changed during the process. So we were able to, and the Lord allowed it to happen. I know He had, there's nothing else I could say. I mean, it was wild at how things would just change and it would be in our favor. It was constant. It was a constant. So they said, he's got to be in your home for several months before the adoption's final. So he moved into our house. I let him stay there a few more weeks because I'll be honest with you, by then I was 40. I'm 43 now. So I was 40, not having kids. And this was going to be your first one. And he's 3. And it was always just you and your husband and the dogs. It was a big change. And I was like, whoa, I got to get myself together. Yes, we had him on the weekends, but then we could give him back like grandparents. Now he's going to be with us all the time. And then all of a sudden I found myself like, oh my God, am I doing the right thing? We just went through all this stuff and I started second guessing myself. A lot of things started going through my head. But he moved in. And the day that we went and got him, me and my mom, a lot of the time, my husband was working during a lot of this. So he didn't have to deal with lawyers. He didn't have to deal with DCF. He just had to go by what I was saying. That's what he went on. But the day that me and my mom went and got him, she rode with me. It was bittersweet. His grandparents had him since birth. Although they're 82 years old, they get around very well. And I mean, that was their child, basically. And his grandpa, he teared up, and the grandma, she did too. They never broke down and really cried, but we took pictures of him hugging him. And the other night, I got to thinking about it. During this process too, my dad, he's a songwriter, obviously, and wrote a song that it was in 21 that he wrote the song where it was some of the darkest days of me being angry. But the song says, he'll come through for you. He'll come through, he will come through for you. And towards the end of that song, he changed the scenario of he came through for you. And the way my dad writes songs is he may go years and never write a song, and then all of a sudden the Lord just gives it to him. He could be in a sleep, he dreams it, he wakes up, and that's kind of what happened. And he just woke up, and there it was. It started coming to him. When we got the call that night, it was kind of like he finished it. He finished that part of that song that he came through for you. He had the next service, he had me and Cohen come up to the platform, and he held his hand and he sang to us. fast forward, he moved into our house, and Lord have mercy, it was a whirlwind. Obviously, we go from being everybody's calm and to he's 90 to nothing all the time. He may have a little bit of ADHD, and he's just, from the time he wakes up till he goes to sleep, he's just going, going, going. But then in September, then they finalized we went, and our lawyer told us, or he told me, he said, you need to be proud of yourself. He said, for fighting back, because normally when you do fight back with DCF, they're coming for you. Normally they do just the opposite. And in the end, it worked out in our favor. I mean, we give God all the glory because it wouldn't have happened without him. But it was a very trying time. I never cried through that, except the two times that I was so angry that it made, my husband on the other side, he dealt with it in his own way. And I guess I tried to stay level headed because I was having to deal with all the legal side of it as well. It made us better people, made us stronger. I will say, going through it, a family wants to go this route. I don't want to be discouraging to anybody. Not everybody's story is the same as ours. Some have it worse than we do, or we did. It's just that you have to know, even if you're going through the infertility, having struggle, you're going to struggle in that department as well. It's very trying. It's taxing mentally, obviously, but so is going through an adoption. Some cases are better than others. And things that I would say would be 3 things: spiritual, physical, mental, your finances. If your spiritual isn't up to par, you might as well go ahead and sign off on the road of adoption. But there again, going down the infertility and doing all that, that's also can wear on your mind as well. Physical and the mental part, if you are easily discouraged, or you're easily deal with depression and you have all these things, just know that this is probably going to make it worse. You need to have these things in order before you walk down this path. I mean, it's crazy to say, and there are programs out there, grants you can get, but you literally do need to have your finances, because you just never know. Besides your everyday life, you never know when you're going to need a lawyer. Are you going to have to shell out 50 grand for a child, or pay, if you want a private adoption, are you going to have to pay for her hospital stay for her to turn around and not give you the child? I mean, it's things like that happens all the time. And so you just need to have your things in order before you go down. Be prepared. I was naive. I walked into it, but I'm very headstrong. And so I was ready to fight. I knew I was going to have to fight. I didn't know how hard I would have to fight. Most of it was unnecessary. I say unnecessary. It made me a better person, I feel like, in a sense. And then something else, if somebody was to go down this road of adoption, I would say it's not for the faint of heart. You have to be willing to do your homework, stay ahead, do your research, write everything down, and date it, because you're going to need it. You're going to have to refer back to it at some point in life. And then last thing I would say would be just to put on your whole armor and be prepared for battle. It's the Lord's will for every child to be saved, and we can't save them all. But if you can just help one child, it's a battle worth fighting.
So it sounds like he's all boy, which my son surprised me on all levels myself, because my girls were like drama and whiny, and he's like throwing himself off of things. And
Well, he can be whiny. He can be whiny. It's his mouth. He's very smart aleck. But he's been around us, so he's probably getting it honest.
He's getting it honest.
Yeah.
So after you got him, how were things after everything was over? Was it easy to just go right into normal life or?
And I want to say that I tried to act like it was easy because we had already had him for several months in our home consistently. But no, I started feeling all of a sudden I started resenting him. It's very strange. So then I started realizing like I started checking myself. Okay, you just went through hell and back for this child, and now you're resenting him? Like, what in the world? Then I started doing some research and I found out that, hey, you're not alone. This is normal. So just like a lady goes through postpartum, there is a such thing called post-adoption depression. And basically it's where you're riding high the whole time. But then when everything is over, it and the dust settles and everything crashes down, you're like, oh my goodness, my life. I've lost my life, And that's what it felt like. And when I realized that, it didn't take me long I snapped myself out of it. But he was very hard through him staying with us when moved in and it was full time, sleepless nights. He never slept with us. He always slept in a little toddler bed in our room. It is worth it in the end, though. I will say it's worth it. I'll also say that if a young couple is going through this, if they haven't been able to have their own, or if they have considered adoption or haven't considered adoption, don't rule it out. Either way, you're going to have it's going to be hard, to be honest, but it's so worth it in the end, knowing that this child could have been anywhere else. And the percentages of kids that are abused in the foster program, when we started in 2020, at the time, it was 80% in the state of Florida. Our system here in our county was so corrupt at the time. And because I fought back, I found out later, because I fought back so hard, our guardian ad litem, the lady that we ended up, the caseworker that we ended up with, I started getting word back that there was judges coming together, guardian ad litem, the system themselves, they were coming together, and there was caseworkers coming together that was trying to put a stop of the corruption. And even now, as of last week, one of the lawyers here in town who is over the DCF department was arrested for child pornography. So, I mean, it's so corrupt. And then here's these kids. At one point, there was kids in our city living in a storefront with some person staying with them, helping them to get ready to go to school. They're just floundering around. They don't know who their parent. They don't know where their parents. They might get to go back to their parents, but they don't know. They're just shifted all over the place. And when you start really digging into it, then it makes you want to fight harder for that child, and knowing that there's actually a child out there versus you haven't seen your own child, you hadn't been able to have your own child. No, a young couple don't have to put their dreams off of wanting their own child, but if they haven't considered adoption, consider it. Think about it, because there is a kid here already that needs good parents, especially that could raise them in truth, teach them, show them the ways that they would never probably. And if Cohen would have ended up with the other family, he'd have never known about. His grandparents are in the church, but they never get to see that youngest one. He'd have never known the truth. He'd have never known. And now, even now, he tells me, and from day one when we got him, I would tell him, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord." He was a baby. So when he started talking and he would jabbering and he would quote it with me. And I was constantly, every time he'd get in the car, we'd write, Cohen, what's Deuteronomy 6:4? Now he's in pre-K and they do try to bring up the Trinity here and there. And the other day we had to have a full-on Bible study while we was getting ready for church. And told my husband, can you come here? Like, I don't know how to tell him without, to help him understand without him. I'm trying to be careful because I don't know what he's going to go back and say there. And I don't need him to be kicked out of school right now. But he'll come home, he'll say, why are they saying there's only one God? And they say that there's three persons in the Trinity. I mean, he gets it. It's like he's getting it, or he's trying to figure it all out, So, but it does you so much good to be able to see that, he wouldn't have had that opportunity if it ended up. And so I don't know, it's been rewarding. It's been hard. Obviously, but it's worth it. It's worth it in the end.
That's so precious. Just hearing your story is proof, like you said, making sure your spiritual life is up and all those things, but that if God's going before you, that you can trust him, you can trust his plan. And every one of our plans not the same.
Exactly.
So take a moment to speak to maybe a mom that is at that crossroads. I'm sure that you remember how you felt figuring out that you couldn't be a mom on your own. It was going to take something, and then you decided to go through the adoption process. But maybe take a moment to speak to a mom that may be right there at that very beginning stage.
So me personally, because of the way I am, like I said in the beginning, I'm either black or white. There's hardly a gray area. I was very matter of fact that, hey, if this is not what the Lord wants, this is not what the Lord wants. If he doesn't want me to have my own, there's something else out there. He obviously had other plans for us. There was a child out there who needed us. And so I would say it's okay to want your own child. Like I said, it's okay. It's okay. That's normal. And you can continue wanting. But there are kids who need parents. There are kids who they're going to need the love. They're going to need the things that you are willing and are ready to give, but haven't been able to. There are ways, there are other options. It's wild. But I would say, don't give up. You don't have to give up wanting a child, but know that there are kids out there who maybe need you, and it's worth it. It's worth it in the end.
Well, we like to leave the podcast with this question for every single person. And what is one last thing that you would want to leave to the Unashamedly You community?
Keep your head up. It's tough at times, sometimes more so than others, Keep your head up. Pray, obviously. And if it's meant for you to go down this path, the Lord will lead you and guide you. You never know who you're going to meet. Talk about it. A lot of girls don't talk about it. Don't be ashamed. If you can't have children, don't be ashamed. Talk about it, because at the end of the day, there's going to be somebody that may hear your story that says, hey, I went through this. This is what we did. See if it works for you. Or I know somebody, she has a child. She wants to put it up for adoption. They need a good home. Be willing to talk about it and see where the process takes you.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast today and being so open with us, sharing your story, sharing your heart behind all of this and your heart behind adoption as well. So I know that it's close to your heart, but I can tell that you truly believe in this method of becoming a mom. And thank you so much for sharing that with us and helping someone.
Thank you for having me.
Happy Mother's Day. And as always, we wanted to say thank you for listening to another episode on the Unashamedly You podcast. We would be delighted if you would leave us a review and let us know how this podcast has helped or encouraged you. Your reviews and comments mean the world, and I pray that you find the encouragement you need week after week with each episode. Go be unashamedly you.